AW, and I've landed there when it's nuking at Peters Road, like 40k an hour, and I landed over here in 15. So local differentiation can make a huge difference when it's blowing out, right? Like you land just a little bit, like, you know, further away or in the right spot. You land a little bit further away from, like, this is quite narrow here. A little bit wider here, a little bit more out of the valley flow can make the difference between relaxing and death defying.
Looks quite wet too.
It's actually farm fields in Laidlaw.
Have you ever landed in Hope?
I have, and Norm will tell you about the time. He was actually quite light winds, and but Hope is a meeting place of valleys, so that's always a place. Like there's places like Saint-André in France, and actually Pemberton. Meetings of valleys are not usually fantastic places when you've got strong valley flows. They can have a lot of excitement. And I landed there one day. I've landed most of the time at the airport, and it's been like a 2,000 meter or 2,000 foot elevator. Like the valley wind, once you get above 3,000 or 4,000 feet, is not actually that strong. It's mostly down below if it's a true valley wind and not so much a meteo wind. And if you're up high, like I've been soaring this mountain here, right? Happily soaring around, you know, 30k an hour forward speed. You fly out to the airport high above the valley breeze, and then you get parked. And you get the last 2,000 feet straight down to the landing field. I had the sailplane pilot come over and ask me to do an aircraft approach. I laughed at him. I'm like, if I do an aircraft approach, I'll go to the end of the runway and then land in the trees at the end of the runway. He's like, oh, that's probably not any better, is it? Then you'll have a tree rescue at the end of a runway. So, yeah, the other place that's super horrendous, if you fly to Hope, around this corner, you can see that as the wind would come around here, it just accelerates, and in this partial kind of lee, that's the worst spot. We've had a parachute deployment here. The guy tried to go around the corner without being high. If you're going to go around this corner, I've done it twice from above the mountain, right? So I was out of the valley breeze, no problem. You do it down here, death defying. And that's like small differences, right? If you're going to fly in places like that, you want to understand them and fly with someone who's, you know, or with the experience to pick it up a little bit. So, yeah, and generally I wouldn't recommend flying to Hope outside of spring. Like April, you can fly to Hope and maybe even fly back, right? You try to fly to Hope in August and fly back, or July, or even now, it's probably not going to happen. So, back to the RASP. You see this for Mackenzie though? You see how there's like 30k an hour of wind, not very high, right? Later in the day, and it goes late. That's actually, I think, indicative probably of a Whistler Express. It'll be interesting for the pilots who go up there tomorrow. What I often do, even if I'm not flying, like I'll probably listen tomorrow on the line chat or the WhatsApp chat and just sort of see what people landed and what they did. And that's actually a really useful way to learn, because a lot of us have to work. We're not all independently wealthy. Use the days you're not flying. How did they do that day? I looked at the RASP, and you can learn something from watching their tracks, listening to what people said. So let me know, JP, how the valley wind is tomorrow.
No pressure.
My guess is given that wind indicator there, it's probably going to be strong in Pemberton, like at the Petro-Can, right till after dark. It's a weird wind. But if you land up at the Miller Beer Farm, it's probably going to be nothing, and it's open on Friday.
Would you see a difference in barometric pressure between, let's say, Squamish and Pemberton?
I know some of the locals have used that, and that's one of the things they do in the Alps. They'll actually have a number, like a 4 hectopascal difference across the Alpine Ridge, and the Swiss pilots will be like, okay, if there's, and they know these stations that they watch all the time, so what Mike's suggesting could work. I gotta admit, I don't bother to do that. Like I haven't, like, to do that, you probably have to kind of calibrate. You have to get sensors that you can get data from every day, watch them regularly enough to sort of get a feel for it. I just kind of look at this. It's kind of a bit of an easier way to do it with a little bit less. I gotta admit, I try to keep it fairly simple. If you've got time to geek on weather and you like that kind of thing, then totally do it. But I also, you can over geek on weather, and you know, just like one of the main things is that, like, I've seen guys like trying to convince themselves of things that aren't true just by looking at another forecast, you know? And if you come up there and you're like, hey, how was the valley wind last night? And they're like, oh, it was howling, and it's like a kind of a similar day. It's probably gonna howl again tonight. Like, that's actually a very accurate way of doing it. Is it kind of similar to yesterday? We're probably gonna have some similar conditions, right? And some of those basic rules of thumb are really worth knowing, because I see sometimes people get stuck in computer world and try to pull something out of it that goes totally counter to. You can also look at, like, these things don't. The RASP doesn't just have wind rams. You can also go to map overlay plots, which is a beautiful name, right? And it'll show the wind at heights. It also, you can scroll down, not just wind. You can look at vertical winds, cloud cover, rain, all that stuff, and you can do it by the hour, right? So, like, let's see if it shows the. Let's see if it shows the Whistler Express at all. Because it actually used to show it up quite nicely. You can also adjust the opacity here. That's what this stuff means. So if you're finding it hard to see the terrain, you can adjust that. So let's look at tomorrow. I bet nothing will be happening at like 1300 on the ground down there. I'm just looking. I'm going to go less opacity here. I'm going to look right. So there's Pemberton right in the middle, guys. And there's the Lillooet Lake. So let's just see if we scroll through the time periods. We've got surface wind at 120. We start seeing some wind down there. I think we are seeing some wind. Like, that's, you see how it actually picked up quite late in the day, right? It's saying, you know, that I don't think it has the terrain modeling to really do the accurate, like, the models don't, unless they're really high power, they don't necessarily have all the terrain super accurate within them, and the terrain is what's causing this localized acceleration. But you can see it is showing a little bit of this here, right? Where, look up here where the Miller Beer Farm is, it's not as exposed to that wind direction, like where like up by where it says Pemberton Meadows. So it's less likely to hit there. Let's just take it up to 8. Oh yeah, hold on, look at that. This is a late wind. It's very often a late wind, and look at that. Now it's going up even stronger later in the day. And that's definitely a normal feature of the Whistler Express, that it lasts till after dark. The true Whistler Express is nuking as you drive out of Pemberton. So, let me just. Where would people like to go? Do you want to talk about specifics of flights in the Fraser Valley, or?
Back to Pemberton.
Sorry?
Back to Pemberton.
Pemberton?
We're going there tomorrow.
Sunshine Coast to Squamish.
I want to hear more about Benny.
More about Benny. I didn't get that email.
We should all be flying.
Where do you posted it somewhere though, didn't you?
Your flight, the Fraser Valley flight?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that.
so that was the other one. I just sent you
The triangle.
the triangle.
Do the triangle in the Fraser Valley.
Yeah, he's sending it to me right now in that Avery thing.
Just by show of hands while we're waiting here, how many people want to go farther on XC? Like, is XC a big? Is that a big thing for
Biggest.
Yeah.
biggest? Okay. So I mean, some people are just totally happy just hanging out on launch. No. So.
All right, so we'll just look at this a little bit. Like, I'm old school, so those Duorama Avery things are interesting, but I'm so used to looking at this that I can get the information in way less than 5 minutes, even a sped up flight. And I'll just give you a little bit of a rundown, because X Contest worldwide is a super useful tool. Like, if I haven't flown XC in a place, I'm going to France, I'll actually look on X Contest, see what kind of flights they do. You can do a thing called Skyways, and you can actually see where they fly regularly. And you go, oh, no one goes to that mountain, I wonder why. And then you find out the valley is infested with power lines and it's super windy, right? And like, the locals in France are really interesting. They'll be like, they have routes, and people do them certain ways, and they're a little bit almost rigid about it, you know? And they'll just be like, oh, we don't fly there in summer. Like as if you're an idiot, because you want to go fly this one site you've heard about. And they're like, oh no, we only fly there in spring. Because of the valley wind, they know it gets strong. So it is quite a a useful thing to know.
Well, in Chamonix, they wait for Britishers, and Britishers are coming. And first time I was there, I saw Britishers going into the forest, and I'm going like, oh my God, we need to go and help them. And they say, fuck them, there will be 3 or 4 more. And I'm going, really?
It's like the Japanese ladies in Manila. They always used to get blown over the back because they're like the slowest, lightest pilots, and all of a sudden they start getting sucked over the back. And I was panicking, and Godfrey's like, "Oh, that's fine, they'll be fine." I'm like, "How do you know they're gonna be fine? They're always fine." Yeah. There was one lady who I was there the last comp I did there, and she hit the power lines in Godfrey's house, turned out the power to the farm. She was fine and flew the next day. We called her Electricity Girl after that. Yeah, I got it.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah, I just. So I'll just give you an idea. Also, like a lot of people get a bit confused by this. So there's the description if someone's managed to write something about it. There's air times, and that's an average speed over the course for that. If you look at the flight, it'll tell you a bunch of other things. It'll tell you the track log length. So if you've been flying for a certain number of hours, you can pretty much just multiply your hours by about 30 kilometers an hour or 40 kilometers an hour, and you're going to get that track log length. So when you were flying the other day, you said it's 49 Ks. That's like your track log, like every circle you do, right? And so that's not really the XC distance, but it is an interesting thing to see. Especially when you only do like up here, your XC distance is 67 kilometers, and then you look at your track log length is 115, right? So it shows you there's a bunch of time doing other things. The only time those match up a lot closer is when you're going downwind